encounters a problem in their life, which then leads them to their dark room where they find dissident information on the internet. It's not really the internet's fault, because the internet's just a platform for the ills that the young people are experiencing. But back to the question, I'm not under the idea that I can't go to some party or use Tinder and get laid. I've done it a couple times, but I didn't.
I remember the story about the car. In fact, did that one. Jesus, that was a great one. Yeah.
Yeah, that hoe gave me some sort of a bacterial infection in my throat, and after that, I said, "All right."
No joke. Right. Seriously, is that serious?
That's true.
Yeah. Wow.
It could have been chlamydia. I would hope not, but I was throwing up, and well,
Jesus Christ! Wow.
Took the antibiotics, threw up the antibiotics. It was a real nightmare.
Since you talked about on your channel, this was a Tinder hookup, right? You actually met some chick in her car. I think it was your first boink as well, if I remember, right? So your first boink ever, you're boinking in the car, and then you end up with some kind of weird infection afterwards. That is just, I mean, most people say just really bad luck, which is what it was, but kind of, yeah, I would be very, after if that happened to me and I were a young guy on Tinder, I probably would give Tinder a wide berth. I'd be avoiding it probably. So, yeah. Is that what happened? You just haven't used it since?
No, haven't used Tinder since.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes sense.
Or any apps. Which I think is good. I don't think they're good for people.
Yeah, I mean, the apps are clearly meant for what would be referred to in Evo Psych as sort of short-term mating prospects or whatever. I have my doubts that something long-term typically comes from it. There are a couple of people in the elite classes that have these sort of almost like marriage apps, essentially, where it's sort of intent on serious pair bonding. But yeah, for the average chud like you or me, although I'm much older, I don't need these dating apps. And I look. In my 30s, I partook of dating apps as well. Back then, well, there was OkCupid, and I had a brief thing with a single mother. I knew nothing at the time about, the associations with single motherhood. But yeah, it generally led absolutely nowhere, and it's that much worse now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but you said, I mean, you're welcome to not want to talk about it, but you said failure to meet certain milestones. Again, someone from the outside looks at you like, this guy looks pretty put together. He's funny. He's pretty good looking. He's pretty smart. He's sporty. He's in shape. What milestones did you miss, basically?
Just like, I mean, I'm what they would refer to as a late bloomer. So in high school, going into high school, I was like 4'11". I basically looked like a kid for most of my high school years, and then when I was 16 in my junior year, that's when Corona hit. So, the times where I would have been able to have those kind of experiences would be my latter high school years, and they just weren't there. No graduation, no prom, nothing like that. So,
yeah, I think the pestilence did a number on a lot of people in your age category. I mean, not just you, but for different reasons. But that sort of critical period was missed due to, the situation that arose from that. But I mean, would you attribute that mostly to the pestilence, or was it just sort of other things? Because, I mean, the advantage of kind of being a late bloomer, at least in terms of the looks department, is you'll stay young looking for quite some time, presumably. But what about the failure to launch led you down the sort of rabbit hole of the online discourse, though? Because actually, it's not too different from my own story in some sense. I mean, in a lot of ways, I was a failure to launch, late bloomer-ish myself. I certainly was an absolute reject in high school, but for different reasons than yours, I suspect. But when I came into the pilosphere, it was the late 2000s, the aughts. I was already in my 30s, and I just knew that there were a lot of strange things that women were doing that nobody was calling out. And then if you made the observation publicly that that's kind of strange that, I don't know, the woman is treating, some guy I used to be friends with, her boyfriend poorly and ordering him around or whatever. No one would really say very much. It was sort of just, yeah. So I noticed certain times of behavior, and then also the misandry, the disparagement of men broadly. No one was saying anything back then whatsoever, and I was a bit baffled, and I ended up online watching this guy's videos. His name is Barbarossa, who's long since passed. At least not. I mean, presumably, hopefully, still alive, but not on YouTube anymore. He started making content in the very late aughts, and some of the stuff he said, just like, wow, I'm not the only one who thinks this. He was at university at the time, and kind of being at least sort of attempting indoctrinating sort of feminism and what have you. And there was, touch grass. It always just feels good when you can make contact with people, even if they don't even know who you are, that make you feel like, well, you're not actually insane or crazy, I mean, because we're animals at the end of the day. I don't think women are necessarily worse or better than men, but the problem is the discrepancy. Really, is that even to this day, men are pretty much fair game to say whatever you want about, and especially back then. I think in some ways it was worse back then. And I just was listening all the time. Now this includes my mother too. I would probably say that the way my mother treated my father was verging on something like verbal abuse. Not in some cases, absolutely, but not consistently. And this was just kind of normal and tolerated. And I always thought it was just very odd. I just thought that's so weird, considering my father, who was very old now, but he's actually literally taking care of her because she's dying at the moment. But just busted his butt to make things right for her. But so that was how I got into this. It's mostly the misandry, but also just the sort of seemingly weird behavior by women. And failure. I mean, failure, that's the thing. I've said this publicly. If you don't fail at life, you're probably not going to have much of a reason to want to discover why you failed, i.e., what were the mechanisms, what were the causes, how, what went into your failure. I mean, and I always bring this example up, but it's an obvious one. And if you're Chad Thunderschlong, you're just cruising through life and you're also smart, I mean, are you really going to look into the inner mechanics of the dating market, or why it's so difficult for some people? Now, some of these people I think do exist. There's this one researcher, Mackin Murphy, who's like a Chad light, but he's kind of a sciencey guy. He's kind of obsessed with the topic. Probably not because for other reasons, but I think in general, if you're failing at something, you want to know why, and that for some reason that's lost to people. But so I find it very very understandable, because I was coming from a similar place. I had some. I've had relationships in the past that none of them really worked out. And, I'm also willing to admit, it's probably a me problem. I've never been particularly successful. I'm only 5'8". I've always been pretty average looking. I'm not a total idiot, but I'm also no genius. So, could have been down to that. Who knows? But you can't begrudge people for looking for answers. And I think that's the point you were making. Now, whether or not those answers are correct is a different question, because you do end up getting sucked into the rabbit hole. But tell me about your first experience with that rabbit hole. So your failure to launch, as you said, then the great pestilence, and you're online, you're just trying to figure things out. And what then?
I think I was like 16, and me and my friend, we heard something about incel forums, and I forgot what website. I think it was probably just on Reddit. We pulled up incel forums, and at the time we were like making fun of them, like, "Oh, these guys are losers." Just like maybe a little bit of cognitive dissonance, a bit of coping on my part, like, "Oh, these guys are losers. They're entitled to women." But a week later, I find myself going on that forum and still kind of coping in my head, but just like, I'm interested, and I kept on returning, and I slowly just became I slowly like it. There are certain things on there that explained maybe subconscious thoughts I might have had in my head. Really, the fundamental notion of it is that we're taught human sexuality is moral, specifically that female human sexuality is moral, but it's not. Male sexuality isn't moral, female sexuality isn't moral. There's no like component to it where if you're nice or if you're upstanding that will increase your chances. It's all just a lie, and these things come down to genetics and social dominance, and that's just the truth of the matter.
Yeah. I mean, this is kind of where I think a lot of people or men in the red pill sphere don't really have much to say, and I think it's mostly because they're running a scam, obviously. Because look, if the idea is you can kind of just trick your way into success through some kind of word salad or word play, well, then potentially most people could do that, but that doesn't really sell very much. There's an infamous guy in the red pill sphere called Rich Cooper, who, unironically, this is before your time, he was selling this product called tactical soap.
Yeah.
Now, like crap like that. I don't know. I look, if you have enough subs, I guess someone's going to be dumb enough to buy it, and then it's worth it, I guess. But at least for him. But yeah, I think obviously I spent a lot of time. I don't know how I would describe myself. Depends on, am I a complete failure? No. I mean, who knows? But I spent a lot of time reflecting on my life failures, and a lot of it is really down to certain things, genetics, I guess, and is retrospectively just looking at situations I was in. So I remember years ago, it was about 20 years ago, there was this French guy, Jules, and I went to university with him. And he was basically an 8, and tall. I think he must have been at least 6'1". So basically, he had it all going. Dirty blonde, blue eyes, And this was the type of guy that was just beating off women with a stick, effectively. He was in a relationship, but all the other women were on his nutsack 24/7, which would drive his GF crazy. And one day we're just sitting on a park bench together because I was on friendly terms with him, more or less. And I speak French, so I just kind of practice with him. And he was complaining, "Oh, it's so stressful." And I was thinking, "What do you mean?" And of course, I was sort of, you're aware when someone's good looking, but yeah, it just didn't really hit me till years later that this was just all halo effect, basically. Because that's the other thing I have to make this point, even though I make it every time. You're smart enough to know this, but a lot of Zoomers think that people my age or whatever, that we have no clue, and a lot of people our age, let's admit, that don't have a clue about this stuff. It's true, but if you don't grow up with the internet, which I didn't, I spent a significant proportion of my life, it didn't even exist. Do you really think as a Zoomer you would have known terms like halo effect or hypergamy or whatever it might be? No, you wouldn't. Yeah. Nobody talked about it. Didn't exist. Normies, when I used to be a normal, we didn't know. So, but anyway, that was the halo effect in operation back then. And it just took me years to sort of realize that. Also little things. I was in a relationship once with a girl, and it was on me. I gained weight, and all of a sudden she didn't want to boink anymore. Now at the time I didn't make the connection because you didn't learn these things. Years later it's obvious. And then a couple weeks later she cheated on me. And I would hypothesize that it was due to my weight gain, and she lost interest in me in that respect. But it all makes sense in retrospect. But the thing is, I think if you're struggling to maintain long-term relationships and even just have a plethora of hookups, I had some, but more kind of like situationships than I would say hookups. But yeah, then you're probably you're not a Chad, or you're probably not in the top bracket. I never claimed to be. And so, yeah, there's a lot of things. I actually put out a video today about this locus control. It's early there, so you probably haven't seen it, but there's a lot that happens to you in life that you basically have no control over, and your dating outcomes are to a large degree part of it. Now, I think there is something to be said for Looksmaxxing. Like if you've never taken care of yourself, and I've looked at some data, like, you're not lean, you're not hitting the gym. And believe me, I'm very critical and skeptical of, just hit the gym, bruh, because I've talked about this. Not everyone can get lots of muscle, but it's worth trying. It's worth making an effort. And for people who haven't, then yeah, you should definitely do that. But I think it's a bit farcical when the assumption is everyone who's failed or is not as successful as they quote unquote should be has not made an effort. There's a lot of this notion that, I think it's safe to say you're a bit of a cynic, right?
Yeah.
Would you? Yeah. And I certainly am too. And there's a kind of comical notion online, mostly spread by kind of mainstream people like Chad Williamson, right?
Mm-hmm.
He keeps on repeating this. He's like, the reason why people are cynical is because they just sit in their rooms and do nothing, and they're afraid of failing, so they just prefer to just pretend like nothing's going to work. And I don't know a single cynical person in my life, and really, with maybe one exception in my almost 50 years of life, was like that. So it's just kind of a weird cope on his part. But yeah, I think I can't help but just have every sympathy and kind of empathy in the world for your situation, despite the generational gap. But that's not really the problem. The problem is people looking in from the outside, saying, why would you find, I don't know, like an inkwell forum even remotely attractive in terms of the ideas? Well, I think it's pretty obvious. Yeah, it's try and explain why things just don't work particularly well. And you find the other explanations. I mean, did you have normies in your life saying, well, the reason why it's not working out is because you need to button your shirt up properly? Some ridiculous, obviously that's a bit hyperbolic, but it's things like that.
Well, that's like the general advice you would hear, but I wasn't, complaining or talking to anybody about any dating problems. So, yeah. I mean, that was the cultural, I don't know, that's what people would generally say. That's the sort of default, quote unquote, blue-pilled mindset you would have.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, again, if you've never done that, if you're a total slob, yeah, it's worth trying that stuff. But I just take issue with the notion that just everyone who's failed has just never made an effort. That's essentially this ideology that's emerged on the opposite end. And it's just patently false. It's just not true. It's absolutely not true. But
Zoomers seem to have this. Sorry to cut you off.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. You are the Lord of the Bright Spear.
They seem to have this idea based off like anime main characters, which I don't know if you've seen any, but they have like this endless capacity for improvement. They go on arcs and they gain new abilities and they get stronger and stronger until they're the strongest in the world or whatever. They seem to have this idea where, you can.
I have a question about would Dragon Ball Z, because I'm not that familiar with anime, would Dragon Ball Z be an example of this?
I have never seen that one. That's a little before my time. I would imagine, though. It's like a basic.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Please continue.
Well, they have this idea that they could just improve endlessly. Or like basically, once you're lean, once you eat decent, once you take care of your skin, like that's it. That's pretty much it. Like if you don't take care of yourself and you start, that's a big deal. But once you're there, and there's no Looksmaxxing that can give you a jawline or give you height. I mean, all these things are genetic, and doing the basic things, especially if you're going to rely on online dating, which is what most people are doing now, isn't enough. So you do this basic improvement. It's good, but you're still going to be,
Now that said, you're not a bad looking guy. I don't know how you are on the height. You're above average height, aren't you?
I'm average, 5'9", 5'10".
5'9", okay, yeah. Well, yeah, tough in this market, I guess, but yeah, I mean, I mentioned this earlier, off recording, but I do still think, it's just something to do with being terminally online, because when I look at sort of normies, both physically and sort of mentally out in the wild, so to speak, or in the city, these are clearly people that their extent of using online is to like look up if they're women, like cute puppy pictures or kittens, and the guys might look up I don't know, where they can buy a new microwave or whatever. Like, they're not using the internet as a portal for interfacing with people. It's just sort of there to just provide maybe services and products, and they're kind of just out there. Because I think once you're online, and that kind of, I think you and I probably both live online quite a bit. I suspect you do. I don't know if you do for sure, but spend a lot of time online, right? And then it's inevitable, right? And there's also that, what I've come to realize is that it does change your mentality. I mean, if you come to believe certain things, whether erroneously or not, that don't sync up with how other people think about the world, it's kind of, you're less inclined to hang out with them. I mean, that's been my experience, at least. And so people will call it maybe the comfort zone, and I guess it is, but do you still make an effort sort of with IRL with people, mingling and trying to do the usual social stuff, or have you just basically given up on that?
No, I still got to try. I mean, not being in college and being my age because of the demographic situation in America, like, when I go outside, I mostly see old people. So my main socialization is just hanging out with friends that I've already had and driving up to their college and doing stuff like that. So
yeah, you definitely should not. I mean, at your age, you need to, I always say this, you got to give it the old heave-ho for a while. There's a point in time where, you might need to call it, but this is not, age 20 is definitely not that point for sure. And again, you're definitely, if people just look at you, you're obviously not in the it's over category, right? You got pretty good facial structure overall. You're fit. Okay, average height. Like, you're definitely not and you're pretty smart. So you're not in the it's over category. So if what you want is sort of long-term prospects, then you probably should keep on trying. Probably owe it to yourself. But the problem is, and you've talked about this in some of your Gerbert Void videos, is I have no doubt that you could land a GF if you wanted, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure you could. But the question is that disconnect we talked about in the beginning. I mean, what would you, apart from boinking her, what would you connect to her with? I mean, I'm trying to, like, do you ever run that kind of experiment through your head? Like, what would you actually talk to a prospective girlfriend about when you're not boinking? Because there's a lot of time when you're not boinking, presumably. And I mean, I imagine you, because if I were in your situation, I'd be thinking about that a lot. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it would be hard to imagine what we would have in common. I try not to think about that, honestly. I just think about crossing that bridge when I get to it, because I find, you can pretty easily make yourself depressed where you're just like sitting in the shower imagining strolling an autumn day with a girl, and then you snap back to reality.
Yeah. I mean, I don't do that for that, but I find myself frequently in a state of daytime reverie about all kinds of things, reliving my life and whatever. So it's not very helpful, obviously, because you can't do these things, and you should ideally deal with what's actually in your life and reality. But yeah, I mean, I'd say given the state of universities, it's a good thing not to go to university right now. I mean, okay, there's still some correlation between kind of overall positive life outcomes and university. It's just, could you actually tolerate being there and the people? So your friends who are going to university now, what is their experience? Are they sort of just, I don't know what their views of the world are like, but are they kind of just hiding their books under the rug and just, not pretending to just go with the flow, or what do they do exactly?
One of them goes to a Christian college, which is quite different. But okay. Another one, they're definitely discontented with the kind of things the teachers will say in class, but they just have to They just have to stick through it, you know. And it's very hard to imagine this is like a good financial investment. Even then, though, like college has monopolized socialization for young people. That's the reason I would go to college. Not really because the accreditation is very important, of course, but you know the actual learning, the actual thirst for information is not any reason I would go to college anymore. I don't think that could be satisfied. We have the internet. You could order books from all around the world. You could do what you can learn what you want to learn. You know, it's just all about the socialization. Like you get to stay in a dorm. It's a walkable community filled with young people. That doesn't exist. You know, like outside of those areas, it basically doesn't in the West. So.
Yeah, and Sir Gerbert, I'd say that was true even in my time. I mean, I had my first, I had zero carnal experiences in high school. I was a reject in a lot of ways. My first carnal experience was definitely at university, and even Frank Zappa said once, if you want to go get laid, go to college. If you want to learn, go to a library. This is, of course, decades ago, but so I think that. University, it's really, I agree with the accreditation as well as the social experience and well, I mean, for me, university was kind of life changing in many ways, in a positive sense. For a while, at least, it definitely improved things that at the time that were lacking in high school. Greater diversity of people to interact with. I actually had good professors. I mean, this is in the 90s, years ago. And so it's just a different experience, nothing like today. And I don't regret going to university for that reason. But if I were, a Zoomer, if I were 20 now or 19, I would have serious reservations just because I find it at times difficult to hold my tongue. And I've seen, even in subjects that I studied, how the wokerati have taken over and just turned everything into this putrid mass of vomit. It'd be difficult. I don't know if I probably wouldn't these days, but for the time, I think it was a good decision. I don't regret that, at least. But yeah, it's pretty rough. But the social aspect, I do think is kind of important. And yeah, I guess because as much as I'm kind of tuned into Zoomer life, or I think I am. I'm not a Zoomer, so I'm not living that life. And, I'm not on dating apps. I'm not, my time is done. But I guess the consensus really is that's where you, if you were to get in a relationship. But I mean, what are your goals with respect to this? I mean, you're definitely not in the it's over category. I think we can agree. You're just not by any metric in that category. You don't look it, you're just not there, right?
Yeah, I would hope so.
Well, yeah, I mean, you never know, but I just think by every technical definition, you're at least a 6. I mean, you got like I said, really good facial features. I'm sure you're aware of your own profile, so you know what your weaknesses and strengths are. But yeah, I mean, but what would you like to happen? So you're not gonna. University is a bit of a trap, and never mind the debt. I mean, the debt's the worst thing, obviously, because, So going forward, what would you basically like out of life?
I mean, out of a relationship, I think the point is for it to last and to have children. I don't see the point otherwise, or just playing house or just boinking each other for 3 years and then she sees someone hotter and then bye-bye. It's just whatever.
Yeah. So you ideally would like to have children?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's that could be difficult, especially considering what you said earlier, that a lot of Zoomer women, females, don't want to have children, at least now. Yeah. That's what they say. Yeah. And I agree with you. I think that when all's said and done, for most people, the point of a relationship, long term, is to settle down and then reproduce. And even if you're not in the rare cases where it's sort of well thought out, it's not due to ideology, you don't want to reproduce it. There's still sort of common goals that you want to work towards or something like that. But I've said this before. When I observe Zoomer relationships and people I talk to online, my sense very much is sort of everything operates off of the sort of butterflies in your stomach. Like, oh, yeah, I got the vibe. And then, I don't know, 1.8 years later, the vibe is lost. And so you're not feeling the butterflies, and then you just sort of terminate the relationship. And then you wait until the next thing, and then the same, like everything is sort of operates off of this visceral gut feeling when it comes to relationships in your generation. Well, to be fair, it's always been like that to some degree. And I remember Generation X women who were just like this. I just think it's been inflated right now. It's much more severe than it used to be in this respect. And yeah, that's a tough sell, because you still need to, if you do end up in a relationship, you still need to navigate the waters and see if it's worth pursuing. You don't want to dive right into it and then discover that she's nuts or has some other issue. So yeah, it's complicated. But when you're referring to, you made a whole video about this, the main character syndrome. That was a reference to these anime characters, right?
That's I think that's one of the primary sources where Zoomers might get this kind of idea, because it's quite popular now.
Can you? I don't know the names. I don't really follow, but what are sort of the contemporary anime figures that would inspire that sort of thing?
Something like One Piece or
One Piece. Okay,
Naruto. A lot of people are very infatuated with this character called Guts from Berserk is the series. Things like that.
Yeah, and I've heard of that. Yeah. Guts, and Naruto I've heard of as well. I mean, I heard of. I can't really put my finger on it. Okay. And these are characters that are always sort of kind of building upon themselves, improving themselves, becoming more powerful, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Guts, I would say less so, but yeah, that's like the general theme. It's all about infinite growth, defeating stronger and stronger enemies,
Yeah. I find it, honestly, I find the whole anime connection so fascinating because it really passed me. Okay. I shouldn't say it passed me by, because I apparently have Gen Xers in my audience that have they grew up with some kind of anime, but I think for the most part, anime starts with sort of at least the infatuation in the West with it starts with sort of the millennial generation, is my sense. Because a lot of anime is about that sort of coming of age and kind of how do you deal with the world. It's sort of relatable. But I wasn't aware of the angle until recently of the sort of main character syndrome, where an anime character is sort of inspirational almost. You can infinitely build yourself up and just kind of improve. But it also just goes to show how, well, maybe out of touch certain people are, and just almost the inability to disconnect the fiction from the reality that they live in. Possibly, I don't know. Do you think there's actually some? I mean, obviously, logically, if you were to ask a Zoomer, do you think anime is, they wouldn't. But in terms of sort of like the underlying psychology, you think that a lot of Zoomers in this context struggle to sort of distinguish reality from fiction?
Yeah, I mean, not in like a super literal sense, but yeah, I think your subconscious, after consuming this much fantasy, it just sort of integrates itself into your beliefs a little bit.
Yeah, I'd imagine. You absorb enough of anything after a certain period of time. Just sort of you passively pick up on it. You just hear things constantly, and it. I definitely get it. Yeah. But I mean, do your friends, the people you're still friends with, they share your views, or are they more normie-esque, or how would you describe them?
They're not like as online as I am, which I think is a good thing. So they have a similar value system, but they're not really into all this like black pill, like all this internet shit.
Yeah, well, it makes sense, and good for them. I really think that the internet, once you get sucked in, it's kind of very difficult to get out of it. Possible, just difficult. And again, I can't ignore reality. When I go outside, I see just normal people in relation, not exceptional at all, but they're in relationships.
Yeah.
But
you have to imagine these people meet in real life, in social circles, which
probably,
is why, like,
almost certainly
trying to find a social circle and facilitate, because like people grow to like each other over time. That's how less conventionally attractive men, that's how they quote unquote ascend or find a relationship, is people grow to like each other in person, in communities. So but the problem is most people meet online, you know, well, not most people, I don't know if it's there yet, but the last data we have is from 2017, 2018, and that's the number one way people meet is through the internet, something like 40%. Or it was actually more.
It's more now. It's more now.
Yeah, we can almost guarantee it's more now. I haven't seen the recent statistics, but I think you could conservatively say most people meet on the internet. That's actually not far-fetched at all. And on the internet, purely on the internet, this black pill stuff is 100% real. Like on the internet, it is sub-8. On the internet, it's in real life where you see normal people meet, you know?
Yeah, and it's an excellent point. And I'm always willing to say that real life is different, at least to we need to make it. If you're actually a sub 5, it is kind of GG. I mean, GG. If you're sub 5, it's kind of GG. I honestly at this stage believe online real life. I mean, sometimes I see sub, but usually it's just kind of average looking people. I rarely see. Well, you don't really, because by the definition, you know, they're not average sub 5s by definition, but that's an exception. But I think that once you're online, things change a lot, and then everyone's just gonna say, "Well, if it's just online, you know, go touch grass, go outside, bro." Okay, I get it, but it's not that simple as you're talking about.
Yeah, these things don't happen in a vacuum. You know.
Nope.
Other people using Tinder actively influences the dating market like an ecosystem, whether you choose to participate in it or not. So.
Exactly. I mean, I think it was during the pestilence period, I was shocked to discover, having talked to some Zoomers, that, if you don't have an Instagram, apparently you're a weirdo. I mean, there's something wrong with you. Like, you don't like, it's like saying, I don't know, you don't have a phone like 30 years ago or something weird like that. And yeah, absolutely. Because if you want to participate in the game has rules that are pre-established, and you got to kind of you have to follow some of the rules, or you can just not participate, but then you're going to lose out on what few opportunities there are there. But given your experiences with Tinder, I mean, ultimately the Tinder thing, it's very confusing because the actual data there, like, the number of human beings that are really high in so-called sociosexuality, I'm sure you heard the term, really basically they just love boinking and they're like nonstop. It's like 5 to 10% of the human population. But if they're on Tinder, as you said, it's an ecosystem. They're going to have influence outside of that. And then even people that aren't necessarily very high in sociosexuality will still kind of go along because that's the thing you kind of want to do or feel like you should do. And especially, with women, I think, be much more herd creatures than men. That's what they're going to do. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I have really just almost endless sympathy for certain Zoomers, at least. There's a different type of Zoomer I have very little sympathy for, but I've talked about these sort of, it's like a know-it-all Zoomer. They just think they figured I don't know if you know it's like a phenotype almost, what type I'm talking about. They just think they have everything figured out. And it's always the case that youth has been brash and kind of headstrong, and that's normal. But it seems like in the current year, 2024, and just our era, the headstrongness and the brashness has been dialed up to, I don't know, like 11,000. It just doesn't seem like a proportional level of that sometimes. And I'm not saying that's that common, but I've encountered a number of them. And obviously, the meme, like the okay boomer meme. I mean, because boomers, there's no distinction for zoomers between previous generations. So, yeah. But generally speaking, I'm pretty sympathetic to zoomers. It's a confusing world. I mean, the other thing I've noticed, the current year is very distracting. You know, I don't know if you suffer from being distracted at all. I certainly do, but I just have it's probably just a psychological trait, a genetic trait. I tend to get distracted very easily, hard to focus. I do have diagnosed ADHD. I was one of the first before it was cool, you know. And but if I had to grow up in today's day and age with all the assignments, school, and books, I probably would have flunked out because I'm distracted 24/7. Back in my day, there were reruns on television and books. I mean, those were kind of, at least at the time, exciting. But I think that's another thing where you see failure to launch, and I think in some cases it really is just due to endless distraction, right?
Yeah.
It's so hard to turn away from. And look, I'm not an expert on this, but the way sort of the dopaminergic system works, I've tried to. It's so embarrassing. Now, I used to read tons. I read very little these days in terms of whole books. It literally feels much more boring than playing a video game.
Yeah.
It feels, and I know factually, even though human memory is imperfect, in the 90s, I was pounding away books. I was like pound away books like Ronnie Coleman used to pound away pounds. And I loved reading, and it just was so interesting. But whatever books can offer just feel insufficient compared to, you're the main character, so and you can do all these cool things in the game.
Yeah.
And so that's a huge thing. Now, you could detox from that, I guess, but people talk about it, and I always think that would have to be a permanent detox. Like, you'd have to, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. There are plenty of people that don't play video games. That's true. But I don't know. I think I would get knowing the types of games I like to play and some that I really enjoy quite a lot, still to some degree, I would get serious FOMO, very serious FOMO, knowing just like, I'm going to read a book by candlelight. It's very, and I think you could recapture some of that dopamine effect, but yeah, it's just, and again, if you're a Zoomer, and I've talked to them, they're just always distracted, nonstop. As am I, to varying degrees, but I'm not in school anymore, so that's the difference, right? You have any of that in your own experience, would you say?
Absolutely. The attention span being lowered by media is it's actually like very bad. It's very foreboding for the future of society. It doesn't really matter how smart you are if you can't focus on a task. Like the young men of today, we can't produce someone who could accomplish great things. We can't accomplish a great philosopher or musician or architect. Like even if these people are bright, they can't utilize it because of media. Like from the time you're in middle school now, you have every night you're faced between like going to sleep and having a portal to all information and all entertainment right by your head. And it's just like, you can't resist.
I mean, yeah, or you can only resist for a certain period of time, and then if you don't, you get FOMO, right? And I think FOMO is definitely real. I've over the year, I'm not. I mean, I honestly don't think I'm a video game addict. I go whole weeks without playing games. Sometimes I get burnt out, but would I want to just never play them for the rest of my life? I don't think so.
Yeah.
So, I'm sure there's kind of a happy medium there, but it's very hard to establish. And yeah, I mean, no matter how precocious you are and how resilient you are, I think no one, well, I won't say no one, very few people can win the battle against the endless entertainment, the endless distraction of the internet. It's like a supernatural demon. You're not going to really beat that as a mortal, right? It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
But, and this kind of ties into something I've been observing recently, and Generation Alpha, the one after you, I guess. Some of them are turning like 12 or 13 right now. I don't know when Generation Alpha starts. So maybe you do it 2012, I think.
Yeah,
so when
something
you're
like
born.
that.
Yeah. There seems to be a sharp divide there, and I've noticed it's again. I hate to like elites, but the elite class knows what's up, so they actively prevent their kids, Generation Alpha, and even the super young Zoomers have done that. They've done it with the super young, from getting access to tablets, dumb phones, internet, media. I mean, they spend a lot of time and resources preventing them, sending them to special, expensive private schools, make sure that they're not exposed to it in the same degree. Whereas people not of the elite class, they're, whether they choose it or not, I think going forward, probably I'd imagine even kindergarten, you're already being exposed to the internet and all this other stuff. And the attention span, it's artificially being curtailed. TikTok, I mean, the fact that TikTok is so expensive, successful, and expensive in terms of the amount of time you invest in it. Because there's that meme, I've heard a couple of people say this, adults, mind you, they say, the thing that's weird about TikTok is I get up in the morning and I start looking at it, and then I put it down, the sun is set. What's wrong with me? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's just, that is not a healthy recipe. And I think in addition to all the other disparities between elite classes and kind of more working class, middle of the road people, that's going to be a huge one. You're going to have children and teenagers, obviously in the prime of their life, that when they're most malleable and most, basically most able to sort of form positive experiences, not being susceptible to the same degree of distraction. And as you pointed out, the ability to focus and not get distracted and direct your attention for an extended period of time is going to be key to success in so many different things. Now, maybe you luck out and your life is a TikTok star, okay, but that's not going to be most people. And it's going to have deadly consequences. Not everyone needs to be some academic, but if you can't just sit there for literally more than 5 minutes and absorb some information, you're going to have a problem. And I've certainly noticed, obviously not to that degree, but in my own, apart from just aging, ability to absorb information, I have to just make a Herculean effort to stick with things. There would be some long article, maybe a scientific article I want to read. Okay. It requires all my effort to read it. Not so much because it's like, sometimes it's technically challenging, but just sort of everything around and like I want to do something else. I want to play a game, or there's a video that came out I want to watch, so whatever it might be. It's deadly. It's really deadly, and I think people really underestimate the effect it's had on Zoomers. I don't know if this has been measured scientifically or otherwise, and the Zoomer experiment is still ongoing, but I think it's a huge factor in some of the life outcomes. Just not sort of failure to launch. I think at least some of that's going to be down to the eternal distraction that is the internet, the entertainment. I mean, I'll give you a case in point, kind of related, somewhat tangentially. I recently went to the cinema for the first time in, I think, 9-10 years, right? With a friend, IRL friend, one of the few ones I have of those, and watched Dune 2, Everyone loves Dune, whatever. And I came out with a revelation that, why on earth, like, it was really loud, like the loudspeakers were too loud. There are people munching popcorn next to me, making noise. It wasn't really a pleasant experience. It was a waste of money, even though I convinced myself, cinematic. And I realized, like, even the cinema, like movies, are kind of dead in the water. They're just not as good as being able to chill at home and pirate, I shouldn't say, sail the high seas, sail the high seas of the internet in search of treasure and entertainment, you know what I mean? And I'd rather just lie on my butt and watch a film on my laptop than waste money on a cinema. Even if even there have been times where I've been subscribed to Netflix, but even that's just better. It's the reason why the internet just kind of provides everything you need in terms of entertainment. Films, like, I don't know, like the phrase "only in cinemas" is kind of funny to me because 40 years ago, well, where else would that didn't exist because, well, you couldn't just watch movies online. So yeah, No, I think it's a huge factor, and I've seen it transform my own life, not necessarily for mostly in a negative way. But no, I don't have a solution to it either. I've been kind of conducting an inner monologue with myself about a sort of a day-long internet detox where I just literally stay off the internet and I use no technology above that existed in like 1984 or something. And
Mm-hmm.
I've only succeeded at a few times years ago, and I can tell you the feeling that it conjures up. You immediately feel a sense of panic.
Yeah.
You do.
Yeah.
Yeah, the panic ensues, like, what's going on? And I had this by proxy because before moving to my now currently totally inglorious shitty apartment, I lived in a much nicer place, but the internet connection was pretty bad, and so it would kind of cut out for 2.5 days or something, and I would just totally fall into a state of panic and what's happening? No internet, no. But then it took a while. You'd settle in and like, okay, I'll just read a book, and then like, so that's the beginning of the detox, right? But initially,
it's like a
really,
whole
really hard
that you go through.
100%. It's absolutely just like a withdrawal. It's like, sugar addiction or whatever it is. I mean, obviously going to vary between individuals, but that sense of not being in touch with the world, being a YouTuber, you need to make sure your videos are doing okay. You get demonetized. I mean, I don't even know. Yeah, it's so hard. It's so hard, but it might be worth it, even just as an experiment. But yeah, it's no long-term solution, obviously, unless you want to just forego society and civilization and give up on everything. It's just not an option because inevitably you're going to return back to it, in my humble opinion. It's really hard. Some people might manage it, just like some people go like sugar-free their whole lives, or keto or whatever it might be. But most people aren't going to manage that. So I don't really have a good solution to that. But I think it's a lot of it is going to come down to the parents, right? I'd imagine your parents growing up didn't impose many rules on you with respect to the internet. They weren't saying, Gerby, you can't get online now. It's already 9 p.m. They didn't do things like, I'd imagine not, right?
They did, but it was a fruitless effort, I mean, if you just give a kid this supernatural stimulus and then you expect them to have like this adult-like capability of delayed gratification, it's just not going to work. They can't have it. They can't have it or they're fucked. That's just the truth.
Yeah, I mean, obviously delayed gratification, I mean, that's part of a suite of psychological traits, which is largely genetic. So some people are going to fare better. Yeah, I mean, this is another thing. This is a meme. I've talked about it, but I don't think you can repeat this enough. It's a meme, but I just have to counter signal like, well, if you don't look good, you don't work on your personality. The reality is that your personality is much less malleable than your body is. I mean, let's say you're overweight, okay, you lose fat, you build. I mean, that's going to change at least your face to some degree. You're going to look better, at the beach. There's no program. There's no 3-day split for your personality. It doesn't exist. And the data are pretty robust about this. So, I mean, people can respond to incentives, but it's not like you can quote unquote work on your personality in an active way the same you can when it comes to whatever your other limitations by your physical appearance. So yeah. And children there was that one study that's been called into question. Maybe it's questionable, but where they gave the marshmallows to the kids. Mm-hmm. And even if it's apocryphal, I still think there's some kernel of truth to that. I mean, kids are going to vary in their traits. Some sit still more, some are more attentive, whatever it might be. And yeah, but if you take the average, well, the internet is not good. And you're right. They're going to succumb to the temptation. It's just the way it is. And frankly speaking, I've observed, just casually, IRL walking through the city or whatever, how parents have offloaded the parenting duty, so to speak, to the tablets. I mean, it's great, right? You don't want to hear your screaming kid anymore, or your annoying 5-year-old just, I don't know, making weird noise. Here, tablet. Oh, wow, problem solved. Don't need to pay a babysitter anymore. So, yeah, it's definitely not looking good in that front. And all this is kind of hypotheticals. We just don't know sort of like the real results for the Zoomers are going to come, I think, in 10 years' time about, we could really sort of say, okay, this is kind of what's happened with the Zoomers. But there are all these kind of confluent factors coming together, making it just really, really difficult. And I think you said that, I mean, preferentially, you would have preferred to have grown up in my generation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry about that. Don't get to choose. I mean, we don't choose. We don't choose when we're born, who our parents are, or our genes. Certainly in our environment. But yeah, there's no doubt that, as I said, that it was different and easier in a lot of ways. I suspect I would have done very poorly in today's environment on multiple fronts compared to when I was growing up. Just because, yeah, just too many personality quirks that wouldn't have synced well. And yeah, and then inevitably probably would have found some online sinkhole where I would have gotten sucked in, and that would have been it. That would have been all she wrote. But yeah, what do you think? I mean, obviously, I'd like to credit myself with a greater understanding of the Zoomer dilemma than most. Maybe I'm giving myself too much credit. But when we're talking about norm, like your parents, I imagine they have no clue what's going on whatsoever, or maybe they do, and they just don't mention it. Do you think they really understand your plight well, or not so much?
I would say that's the case with most boomers. They don't understand. My parents are actual boomers. They're in their 60s. Yep. But
gotcha.
I would say they're surprisingly aware. They're like very, my mother, and they understand. Yeah. Which that's something that I'm grateful to have. So
that's great. I mean, I doubt they have good solutions. Why would they? But at least they're not. There are other people out there, online content. There's one guy, I always forget his name. He's got a bunch of kind of initials or something in his channel. DBD. Oh, Christ, I'm sorry.
DBDR,
I watch it.
Probably.
Yes, DBDR. Yeah, thank you. Sorry, DBDR. It's just I'm bad with acronyms. It's all on me. But I mean, you listen to his tales, and I don't know if they're obviously, who knows if they're representative for most Zoomer relationships with their parents, but I mean, they're just out to lunch. They have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
No desire to understand, no capacity for that matter. And yeah, not great. Not great. I mean, that said, I mean, the inability of parents to understand the children's, the offspring's dilemmas is kind of, it's perennial. I mean, there was this is before your time, but I'm sure you heard of the Great Recession, 2008, 2009.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. So I was in my 30s, but I was forced to move back in with my parents because, things put me out of work and it wasn't great. I couldn't afford rent anymore. So it was, for a year, I had to live with them again. And at the time, of course, you had to, when you were applying for jobs, you had to send out your application online. Even then, it was ready. And, so I'd be busting my ass kind of writing cover letters or whatever it might have been at the time. And my father thought I was just sitting there twiddling my thumbs doing nothing, and then was lecturing me about how back in the 60s he was pounding the pavement. So it just he didn't see, basically it took until basically the last 4 or 5 years for him to realize that tech has taken over the world. When I was going to university in the 90s, it was like ancient, right? But he unironically would tell me, why don't you just handwrite your reports and your essays and your assignments and just, like a scrap of paper, like, because that's what he did in the 50s.
Yeah.
So, it is a thing, people not being able to understand. So, but this one is so difficult because the environment has shifted so quickly that you might as well be culturally kind of like a different species. I sometimes joke that way, but I think it's kind of true. Most parents are not going to be able to keep up with that, especially if they're just super normie and just went through the motions and whatever that might be. They're not going to get it. But at least you have that. Your parents are not totally misunderstanding of your situation. It's something. something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But so do you think that your content is mostly about, I don't know, sort of offering relatability to your audience? Because I guess most of them are Zoomers, I'm the exception.
Yeah.
I'm the biggest Gen X fan of Sir Gerbert of the Bright Spear. I just want to say for the record, but yeah, they're probably mostly Zoomers.
Yeah.
Would you say that?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And it would just be diagnosing problems that aren't diagnosed by older people that can pretty much only be seen. Like, yeah, what you said is true. They can pretty much only be seen by younger people because they're the ones who are in it. You see, at like 2012, these social trends, like they were there, that you could see the hints of them, but they skyrocketed right around the turn of the last decade, and that would just be hard to perceive for anybody who wasn't, young during that time, who didn't really grow up in it.
The only reason I know about it is I'm terminally online. So,
yeah.
But yeah, for me, in a lot of ways, the turning point was around 2014, because I talk about this too. I mean, it's kind of a cheesy term. It's a bit gay, but it's sort of like culture wars. But I just noticed how things seemed kind of normal before that, and then all of a sudden, at least to a varying degree, 2014, things get really woke, and all the kind of stuff we associate with extreme progressivism kind of starts popping up here and there. And every year afterwards, it gets worse and worse to the point where, I mean, it's just kind of par for the course right now. And but I'm not going to grill you on your politics, but you don't strike me as ultra progressive or liberal. So, as I'm not particularly, I don't know what I am, but I'm definitely not that. And that's when things just really started taking off, I think, culturally. The dating stuff probably, I think I'd agree with you, was a bit later. So, like, the pronouncedness of online dating apps, I would say, probably occurred something around 2018, really shot up quite a bit. And I think probably around, turn of the decade, that's when you see a lot of the lookism content popping in and out, right? About 2020, there, 2021.
Oh, yeah, that's a big thing. Now, but when I said turn of the decade, I meant like the last decade, like 2012.
Yeah.
But,
they're very, I totally agree with you. There are various inflection points there. But so we want to talk about the cultural one. I think it's 2014, where there's just the wokerati start taking over, and I don't know, putting like Africans in like Viking films or whatever, and whatever they like to do. And then like the dating stuff seems to really pick up like 2018, like everything becomes apps and everyone becomes obsessed with Tinder. And then in terms of the YouTube content landscape, which you and I both kind of live in and exist in, it's the lookism content, which really kind of comes in strong. 2021. Well, sir, maybe during the pestilence period, especially.
Yeah, that's when it surfaced. But now it's like fully mainstream. You go on on TikTok or Reels, there are like hot blonde girls talking about mewing. You're like, what's going on here?
Oh yeah, mewing. Yeah. Well, you talked about this briefly. I mean, the idea as an adult that mewing's going to do a whole lot for you. I haven't. I'm deeply skeptical that as an adult it's going to do anything for you. But I don't think it's going to do very much, to be honest.
Well, it's basically a farce, because mewing is what anybody naturally does if they're not a mouth breather. So people act like it's like this occult thing you could do, like secret. It's like, no, everybody mostly does it unless they have an orthodontic issue.
Yeah, essentially. And even to the extent you want to, grant it credence, in your formative years when you're growing and you're literally growing, that's when it would probably make an impact, not when you're 25 or whatever, like some people claim. But there are people out there left and right taking advantage of that. There's some kind of Chad guy on YouTube, Brett something, I've seen him make videos about. I mean, the guy, it's just propaganda. It's just a scam. And then God, what's the guy? There's this Tyrone character on YouTube who's made videos about mewing as well. Dunn Austin something. You might know him, but anyway, yeah, I don't, yeah, I don't really buy into that. But I mean, you've spent also, and I'm curious about so the whole nofap thing. I have certain opinions on it, but I guess the one issue I do have, you probably would agree with me, is that it's also sold as a kind of magic formula. Like you drink it, you're going to turn into the Hulk and, leap around 10 miles. Like you start no-fapping and it's basically, it's GG for the rest of the world because you're going to turn into Superman, right? That's like a version of it. And the worst versions of it, you know who Hamza is? I call him Bathrobe Man.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Probably, yeah. One of the horrible scammer. Awful. But anyway, I mean, he make blatant lies, claims. If you nofap for long enough, your testosterone goes up 400%. Like, yeah, okay. I don't know how dumb you need to believe that, but apparently some people are. So what is your take? And so you'd agree with me that it doesn't, confer upon you superhuman powers, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. But it seems to be my understanding, as someone who's old with low libido and sleeping problems, like it's mostly about discipline, right? Sort of like not fapping, which is prawn addiction. That's another thing I didn't grow up with because I always tell this story, but I feel like I'm the old man telling the story again. But when I was growing up, the closest you could get to prawn were these magazine stands, right? And you see like penthouse magazines in plastic covers, and that'd be like the only time you'd see kind of semi-naked or even naked women, and it was a big deal. The only other options were smut shops, as we used to call them, where you buy like VHS videotapes, and it was so embarrassing for anyone to see you go in there that nobody wanted to go in there unless they just didn't give a rat's ass. So, yeah. But the nofap movement, I need to stop calling things like everything's a movement these days. It's so annoying. Like the no child movement, like it's not a movement. I mean, unless words change meaning over time. I get it. So maybe the new movement these days literally means like an online bunch of people online doing something. For all I know, it doesn't matter. But community is another one that drives me up the wall. But yeah, it's mostly a reaction to prawn addiction. I think that basically, if you're a Zoomer and you're a guy, you're wanking off pretty much every day, multiple times, to just ever increasing variety of prawn. It's insatiable, and so I think the nofap, I don't know, the nofap thought process arose from, look, we need to put a stop to this. We need to sort of break the cycle. Is that how you would describe it? What's your full take on nofap, Kirby?
Well, it's definitely not a magic bullet. It's not like these semen retention powers give you some superhero-like abilities or increased testosterone or whatever. A lot of that's foolish and coping. But yeah, I mean, a lot of young people are addicted to it because that's what I mean. It's just a bunch of people boinking endlessly. I mean, pretty easy to get addicted to start whacking off when you're young, taught it's healthy. And it has dopaminergic effects. It's bad. I think it can cause, it enlarges the amygdala. That's what some literature says. So it can make you stressed. It can ruin, it has similar effects to all sorts of internet addiction, but it's like a heightened version. And generally, I just think like, if you're a guy like me, I'm not interested in promiscuity or going out porking. I don't think that's good. I don't think that's good for me. I don't think that's good for civilization. And if you're just trying to stay steady, and if you're a pretty atomized, the majority of men, they're not going to get in a chance to have these experiences or get in a relationship most times. So it's just like you're torturing yourself by constantly showing yourself sex. Like it's shown that the more you view this stuff, the more you're preoccupied with sex. So it's like showing a starving African kid mukbangs. It's just torture. Like, why would you do that? You could just, it's much easier to focus on your life and be content if you're not constantly exposing yourself to these sexual images.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. It's I mean, there is something to be said for post-nut clarity. You've talked about that. I mean, you've been there, right? I think your Tinder incident was
Yeah.
a huge, no pun intended, instance of post-nut clarity. But I think a lot of guys who aren't really high in sociosexuality, and they do exist. Like, do you know the guy Homath by chance? Homath?
Oh, I've seen that. I haven't really looked at much of his,
Yeah,
but yeah.
yeah, I haven't either. But I saw he was duking it out with an actual scientist, so I've been checking that out. But his claim, I mean, if you want to believe him, is he kind of had his glow up and going from very little success to sort of just a lot of short term kind of boinking claims to boink dozens and dozens and dozens. Maybe it's right, but anyway, he said that ultimately he kind of left him feeling kind of unfulfilled. And I think if you don't have a high sociosexuality or it's more in the normal range, yeah, that's what's going to happen. In his case, it's the promised land. Like once you get there, oh my God. But the problem with that, and I think you would confirm this, even though it was a single incident that sort of taught you the wisdom of avoiding Tinder, is that you need to know what the pizza tastes like, so to speak, is my analogy, right? Like if you go your whole life, people talking about, oh, pizza's pretty good, it tastes good, and you never even touch pizza. It's not going to be enough for other people to say, oh, it's good, but it's not that great, So you kind of got to go through the experiences. I mean, if you don't go through whatever it is, it's not just down to boinking. It could be really anything. So in his case, he needed to apparently have dozens of episodes before he realized, like, this is just wrong and it's just not working well. And I'm messing girls' lives up, and they're messing my life up, and it just doesn't make any sense. And in your case, the infamous car incident. Yeah, I don't know. I just find it. I don't mean to make light of it. It's just kind of epic in its own right, as a sort of instructive episode of a person's life. Yeah, I think that it's not. People just need to go through that experience, which is getting back to inkwells. That's really hard to relate to them, because obviously I'm totally sympathetic. Telling them it's not the be all and end all isn't going to do much. Like it's like telling a starving man, like, food's okay, but it's not that great. Yeah. But yeah, it's so I can see the utility in the nofap thing, but I'll be blunt. I mean, you seem like, you obviously have a good head on your shoulders, and you're pretty good looking. And have you thought about, in pursuit of the traditional life, geomaxing as a JBW, so to speak?
I have. I mean, one of my requirements though would be I want to marry someone white. I want to have kids with someone white. So the only place I would go is Eastern Europe, and I feel like that's fading. You don't have the same advantage of like being taller or whatever.
It's not just that, Sir Gerbert. It's worse than that. It's Eastern Europe has higher divorce rates than Western Europe and the United States. Actually, they're much higher. Well, I mean, relatively, we're talking like 10% higher usually. It's not. I've been saying this for years. For years, the myth of this Eastern European woman who's traditional, and this is not true. It's just not true. So, yeah. Well. Credit to you for being honest about your preferences. I think anyone should be allowed to have their preference, and I'm certainly not a progressive, so I'm not going to accuse you of things that aren't true. But yeah, that's yeah, that's difficult then. Well, there are Caucasian Latinos and what have you. They exist in South America. That could be. That's a potential option. Place like Brazil, Argentina actually is the whitest country. Unironically, the whitest country in the American hemisphere. Whiter than the United States, actually. In fact, so that's an option if you're interested in that. Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if you look specifically at Argentina. A lot of these more. It might be that white women are just cooked. It might just be over. Like I don't know. If you look at Argentina specifically, if a lot of the the Western sort of cancer has infiltrated there. Do you know anything about that?
Well, not specifically with respect to Argentina. I have talked to Latino bros on occasion, and I suspect the cancer has arrived there too. Now, this is a bit of a tangential, and here's why I'm saying this. Have you heard of something called Sweet Baby Inc. by chance?
No, I have not.
Okay, well, praise be to the gods. So, if you like to play certain games, I don't know what type of games you play. I guess shooters. I don't want to make that assumption. I have no idea what kind of games do you play. Or
I rarely play games nowadays.
Oh man, props to you then. Oh, well, good job. But yeah, so Sweet Baby Inc. is this kind of they're kind of a company, a think tank, whatever, and they basically pressure gaming companies to produce woke trash in games. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because relevance that recently Asmongold, you know who Asmongold is, a legendary streamer. Yeah. He talked to this guy from Brazil who started a Steam page that's this past 200,000 now followers of Sweet Baby Inc. Detected. And he talked to Asmongold for about an hour and said that all of this woke stuff and it's in Brazil too. There are tons of it stuff too. So, if that's anything to go by, it's probably there too. It certainly exists in Europe as well, in Western Europe. I can just walk through the landscape, but I still believe, and it's a question of degree, I still believe that the United States is ground zero for this stuff. I mean, maybe Canada as well. And the Anglophone countries, the UK is really, really bad, but basically US is sort of ground zero for this stuff. So yeah, I mean, it might be too late. I think it's worth a shot. Because I mean, if that's what you want, then, you got to give it a go. And it's going to be really hard to find a Zoomer female, especially the white demographic in the US that isn't just woke up to the wazoo, so to speak, I'd imagine. But yeah, I think you should. Yeah, that's worth investigating, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Argentina.
Well, yeah. I mean, if we're just if you're, yeah. I mean, just purely demo. I mean, they're the whitest country in the American hemisphere, both in North and South America at the moment. I believe. So yeah, but is that a guarantee of anything else? Well, probably not. To be honest, I mean, the likelihood that the disease is not spread there, I'd say, is pretty low. So, not a whole lot you can do. All the English-speaking countries, like I said, are the most woke, the most just kind of down this direction. In Germany, where I live, it's kind of a mixed bag, although it's pretty bad too if you pay attention. I see, stickers and placards in the streets all the time, about feminism and how terrible men are and stuff like that. And I pass and I read it and I roll my eyes or whatever. And you see it in other ways too. But I don't know if there's any place where the current year stuff is not really taken hold and kind of just in fact. But I think in your case, it seems like what you want. You want to do the usual. You want some kind of relationship that's going to lead to a marriage, where you can propagate your DNA, preferably with a. Is that something you're willing to compromise on, or is it absolutely has to be white?
It's a pretty high preference. I wouldn't say it's like absolute, but
okay, fair enough. But high preference. That you gotta work towards that goal, I guess. I still think it's probably possible in the U.S. I mean, and if you think about it this way, you managed to kind of decouple yourself from prawn and from games. It could be possible for you to kind of return to IRL life, maybe Wyoming or someplace like that, and just find that woman and just kind of move away from everything, move away from the internet, if that's what you want.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds almost like you're ready now to just leave the internet. So
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's any escape. I might be in too deep. But my friend just got married in January. He's 21. His wife's like 19, 20. They're both, and they did everything right. So I just want it to work, because if it doesn't work, it would be so over, man.
Well, I hate to be the the eternal black pillar here, but statistically, getting married at that age, higher risk of divorce. I imagine, were they what were their body counts before?
They're both very conservative Christians, so
both
virgin. Yeah,
gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I've looked in the stats on this. Getting married very young tends to produce higher divorce rates. This levels out over time. This could be attributable to a number of things, I guess, but yeah, I mean, I hope it works out for them. Are you a believer, or you just go through the motions, or you sort of you've given up, or what's your relationship with the Lord like, Gerby? Tell me.
the Lord. I'm trying to find the Lord. I'm always trying to find the Lord. I want to believe in the Lord. I would say I believe in. I'm a Christian.
Okay. Well, that's good. I've for most of my life, I've envied sincere belief. I wish I had sincere religious belief very deeply. This contrasts me with a close friend of mine who also watches your content, by the way, who is has no desire to have sincere belief. But I'm an atheist with the desire to have sincere belief. I see it as being quite beneficial.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I mean, God, this sounds like such a cheesy suggestion, but have you looked at your local church but they're all old, right? That's what you said. They're all old.
Yeah, they're old, and they're old, and also like the divorce rate isn't different,
No, it's not. It's not.
It's actually some say it might be
higher.
Worse. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I mean, there's so much information and misinformation online, and I'm probably in possession of misinformation too. I'm not omniscient. I'm just a normal person. But so here's the thing about divorce and the actual stats. The more educated and wealthy you are, the lower the rate. The more religious you are, it doesn't seem to do anything. It seems to have no effect. This runs counter, of course, the narrative you'll hear that, Christian values. No. What correlates much more strongly is more money and more education, lower divorce. Your religious belief has now. It's all contextual. Like, for all I know, in the Islamic world, that's different. But in the Christian world, in the United States specifically, Christianity has no positive effect whatsoever. And anecdotally, and this is correlative probably, some of the southern Christian states have higher divorce rates than some of the blue states. So, yeah, make of that what you will. But
yeah,
it's an unfortunate reality that Christ is not a shield in this respect, at least. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of mythology. Yeah,
it seems like whenever Zoomers try to do the trad thing, it seems like they're just wearing a costume. It doesn't really seem genuine. LARP. Trying to revive this old order. It's a fool's errand. It's like closing the barn door after the horse has bolted. It's like getting in bed with a streetwalker and doing the deed and then putting on a condom. It's cooked.
Yeah, it's a form of LARP. And the problem is it's very difficult to keep up traditions when the majority of society isn't behind you, right? I mean, you can do that. I mean, the Amish, right? Or the Quakers to a lesser degree. Then they're like Orthodox Jews that just kind of live in their own little bubbles. And then they're same with Muslim. I mean, it's sort of possible, but the sort of broadly Christian society that sort of broadly follows certain tenets, but isn't so extreme. Like you don't. I'm sure you heard of the Scarlet Letter story. I don't know what you read these days in school, but anyway, like, you don't want to necessarily live in the type of Christian environment like the Pilgrims, where it's just really, really severe and strict, and there's lots of punishment. But you want something sort of broadly like that. Well, that just doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't exist in the States. Certainly doesn't exist in Europe either.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's going to be interesting. I say this as an outside observer with respect to your friend who got married, simply because will they be able to buck the trend? Most of the world is not behind them. In fact, most of the world, especially in the U.S., thinks that their project is somewhat laughable, I'd imagine. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, but I do know one thing, Sir Gerbert. I think if you are sincere in your belief, you should keep your faith.
Yeah.
I think it's an important thing. I think it has immeasurable utility and value if you actually believe. Now, I don't think a person can force themselves to believe. I know I've tried; it doesn't work. But if you can do that, then yeah, you should. But yeah, it does feel a lot like a LARP, and society isn't behind you if you're going for that sort of thing. And in any event, I mean, it doesn't. You have to live the life, right? You have to. Saying that you're a Christian and then boinking 1 million people on Tinder, and it doesn't have much value, right? So
yeah,
that's not going to do a whole lot. But that's another positive. Speaking of Latin America, is that they are. I mean, I imagine you're not Catholic. You probably belong to some Protestant denomination, but Latin America is still profoundly Catholic, which is something. Quite religious, pious. Basically every Latin American country is far more pious than the United States is. Another plus point, if you decide to JBW Geomax in that context, it could definitely redound to your benefit. And if you're willing to be flexible about the particulars of the Christian sect, that is. But I'm sure that wouldn't bother you too much, right? Catholicism, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's another something positive. In Argentina as well. I mean, they're still quite Catholic there. But all the countries are. Of course, the poorer countries tend to be more religious, but that's a general correlation you can observe throughout the world. So that's not remarkable. But yeah. Might want to check out Brazil then. I don't know. But yeah.
I'll think about it. Ideally, that's like a plan B. Ideally, I would want to just meet an American girl.
Of course.
But would you not to like ask for your advice or anything, but just in generally, would you recommend young men to get married? Do you think that's a good idea?
I don't give advice, and I always say the worst advice is advice. I think I'm too fallible a human to do so, but I think I'm inclined to say no, but the problem is what is it's always contextual, right? So, like I said, wealthy, educated individuals tend to have much more stable marriages, right? So, probabilistically speaking, if you come, do you come from a working class background? I imagine. I don't mean to. It's not an insult, but just
like white collar.
Yeah, white collar. White collar, not blue collar. Okay, fine. Then if you could find somebody of like mind and back, maybe. But I generally would. I don't advise, but I would advise against that just because of the risks. To both men and women. I mean, women in divorce lose a lot of money. Men lose a hell of a lot of mental and emotional health. They're much greater risk for self-deletion. But that's what you really want. Who am I to tell you not to do it? It's not my place. I'm just some dude. I'm willing to listen, and I can tell you what I think. And I really do have the greatest respect for you and your craft. I really enjoy your videos, but it's not for me to tell you. I mean, the problem is there are also these strong correlations between like relationship stability. Like marriages tend to be more stable than, for whatever reason, I don't know why. I need to ask an expert. Like, live-in relationships, like compare. Like you live with your girlfriend for 4 years, like that tends to be less stable than, officially getting married and then, in the eyes of the state or the church or whatever. And for whatever reason, I mean, I don't know the reasons. I could speculate, but I don't really know, but it is certainly a risk. There's no doubt that it's a huge risk. Divorce rates are variable across different demographics, but whatever the demographic is, in the context of the Anglosphere, especially in the United States, marriage is a huge risk. I personally, unless you really, really know the partner in question, the female in question, and even then, you never really know. It's very, very risky. Now, there's a simple solution to this. I mean, in Europe, I would be much less averse if a guy said to me from Germany or the Netherlands or Sweden, would you advise? Again, I don't give advice, but would you think it's okay? Should I get married? I say, well, if you could, and it will suck if it ends, but the monetary issue is much smaller in Europe. There aren't these massive payouts, and there aren't these vulture-like lawyers that are kind of urging mostly the female side to take him to cleaners. So the take him to cleaners things doesn't really exist here to the same degree. So in that case, at least in terms of risk reward, the risk would be mitigated to some degree. But yeah, and in the U.S., I still think it's a very, very dangerous endeavor and undertaking. But ultimately, you have to know, and you already are knowledgeable about a lot of things. But I don't. Ultimately, and for my part, I've heard what you wanted, and I want you to achieve that. I want you to, marry some nice white girl and pop out 2.5 kids or however many you want, and maybe go to church with her. If you think getting married and it is feasible to do that, then you should, but you need to be aware of the risks.
Yeah, I honestly don't think it is. I just think it's like
okay.
It's just a nightmare. I think just having divorce on the table sows the seeds for it to happen in the first place due to the nature of people.
Yeah.
It just can't.
Always. Yeah. It's always an option. And then people all bring up prenups. Well, that kind of it's a mess.
Yeah. What's up with the prenups? Does that like?
Well, I'm not an expert on this by any means, but prenups can be nullified as well.
Oh, God.
But there are many cases I've read about, at least. I'm not an expert, again, but many cases which prenups can be nullified. I mean, I guess they could work, but here's the other thing, Kirby. You're going into this marriage. You're religious in the eyes of God, no less, and you're saying, but let's you see this paper, like these like 100 pages, you got to fill that in. And, okay. So like if anything goes south, like that's just not, I think a lot of religious women probably would be less inclined. I mean, there are all sorts of reasons why a woman wouldn't be inclined towards that. But I think if she's sincerely religious, I don't think she'd, favor a prenup. It's a mess. It's literally a minefield. And yeah, I don't know. And look, I'm not Rich Cooper or some, red pill guru, I'm not an expert on this. I don't claim to be. In many respects, my life is a failure. I certainly have not succeeded, and I'm not some, I don't have, 3 kids and happily with a dog, whatever, it's not me. So I can tell you what I can observe and what I've learned and read. But, as always, the decision comes down to you. If you want to do that and you don't think the risk is worth it, I respect that, and I actually agree with you. Probably not. And here's the other thing. I mean, especially in the United States is just such ripe ground for things to go awry. Because even if you manage to make it out to the middle of nowhere in Wyoming and, in some town of 5,000 people with a church, I mean, the internet is everywhere unless you decide to just totally abandon everything, right?
Yeah.
And nobody does that. Even Homath said, "Oh, I got so tired of all the corruption of the city and what I was doing, the women were doing to me. I moved to the woods, and yet here, he's making YouTube videos. He's still plugged in,
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't have there are no solutions, only trade-offs, as the infamous Thomas Sowell quote goes. But it's true. Anytime you make a decision, there's going to be a trade-off there. I just learned this today, by the way. It seems totally unrelated, but so a couple of months ago, I bought an air fryer. Oh, great. It's been amazing, seemingly. But most air fryers have Teflon in them, which increases your health risk, especially for neurodegenerative diseases. And I'm going to be throwing that piece of shit away tonight, I think. I didn't know, but what was the trade-off? Well, easy food to cook, fast, convenient, different setting, great. But oh wow, there apparently is a real health risk by using them repeatedly.
Oh, I was about to get one. I didn't even know that. All of them have
I'll
that?
tell you, no. We'll be in touch. Look, I'm doing research, not right now, but I was doing research on Teflon-free ones.
They probably don't even work well. That would just be my immediate. I don't know.
I'll have to look into it, but I mean, it's a particular concern to me because my mother's actually dying of Alzheimer's, and I have a genetic increase. I know a lot about certain things with genetics because I basically have an increased risk due to a gene variant that I have. That's why I always say next time choose different parents. But so it was very concerning when I learned that today. I was like, oh wow, I've been cooking with this thing for I don't know something like half a year, give or take, and it's taken over using the oven. But that's why I mean it's meant to. Here's a trade-off. Like the trade-off they didn't tell you because they don't care whether or not people have health problems. But there's no simple solution to anything. Everything has a trade-off. Everything in life. There's no. Here's the other thing. If it seems like it works, whatever it might be, and it's simple, and there are no drawbacks to it, you should look at the fine print. Whatever the situation is, be it an air fryer or whatever it might be, you need to look at the fine print because there's going to be a trade-off inevitably. And I think that's certainly the case in marriage. I mean, and we're not going back. We're not going back to like fault divorce, versus no fault divorce. But I'm also not saying, look, I'm not some red pill guru. I've looked at the data, and the educated, wealthier people tend to have much lower divorce rates, much more stable just lives in general. Lower rates of mental illness. I mean,
so I need to go find like a rich white educated liberal woman.
Well, that's the thing. Have you heard of the term luxury beliefs?
I couldn't tell you what that is now.
No, but hey, we're all learning, right? Yeah. So luxury beliefs go way back, but there's this guy, Rob Henderson, which I may, if I'm lucky, if he's willing to talk to a chud like me, get on my channel. But luxury beliefs are basically beliefs that signal status and kind of standing, but to one group, but also impose penalties on another group. So there like two classic examples might be back in the days of St. Floyd, right? Of defund the police, get rid of the police, right? So the people who were saying this, they did research on this later. They were almost all of them were upper middle class to wealthy, and then they did polls of people who were actually poor and working class, and nobody wanted to defund the police. Like that's an example, right? You're doing it to virtue signal, or another common example might be actually this is taken from his own biography. He put out his book. Will I ever read it? I don't know. If I can get off the internet and not be distracted, I might. But I know the gist of it is basically he came from foster care, Rob Henderson, and but he was saved by his IQ. Basically, lucked out in the intellect department, and so he ended up going to Yale. It's a complicated story, but he was talking to this girl there who was talking about like the joys of polyamory and how people need to be less restrictive in terms of their sexual practices, and then he asked her, well, so what do you plan on doing? Oh, I'm going to graduate and work, and then I'm going to get married, have kids. Like very conventional, heterosexual, like whatever. And he just kept on encountering that. So that's another example of sort of preaching whatever idiot, and to signal, oh, look how cool I am. I'm hip. I'm with but you don't actually. It's sort of ideology for thee, but not for me, because it's kind of destructive if I were to practice this. But this goes back, way, way back. People used to signal luxury beliefs with the things they did, like learning the niceties of consuming fine wine and all this other stuff to sort of signal that they're different, right? The problem, and this is a very deep issue that I've covered at least tangentially, is that luxury beliefs have literally destroyed the working class and the middle class, and slowly unraveling the middle class of the United States. Places like the Rust Belt and the Midwest have been absolutely gutted by the insanity of the current day ideology. One of my closest friends lives in a Midwestern city. One of the hardest working, sincere, love him like a brother guys I know, whose life has been, I think, to a large degree devastated by the ideological nonsense of our day. And a lot of this comes down to a lack of structure. You see, there's a big picture thing going on here that we're observing that nobody really wants to talk about. I don't have no, you're not obligated to watch my videos, but I put out a lot of videos. And have you ever heard of the concept called noblesse oblige?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so it's French, means literally the nobility obligates, like they're duty bound. This term emerged in the Middle Ages during the feudal period. Now, the feudal period where the economic system was very particular. You had farmers, basically, crop shares, whatever, doing work in the fields, and you'd have some relationship with a feudal lord who would offer protection, and it was an intimate economic relationship. And so this is where this term comes from, that they had the nobility had an obligation to those underneath them, the peasants, basically. And as the economic system in the West has transformed over the centuries, we moved away from a feudal system, and then I don't need to bore people with the details like mercantilism. The economic necessity of having these obligations, ended up just being dissolved effectively. But there was still a kind of cultural weight and tradition there, whereby the nobility, in this case, like the upper class in the sort of industrial world, post-industrial world, had some kind of obligation to offer guidance. That has completely disappeared and has been disappearing since the mid-20th century. And so, if anything, and they probably always have, the upper classes felt the nobility sort of contempt for the lower classes, but they're no longer obligated to take care of them. And so, all the dysfunction we've been talking about, and so much more, is downwind of this, I think. The fact that the leaders of society, I don't mean the president, but the people who do the best in society and have the best lives, are not setting the example and feel no obligation, morally, ethically, and certainly not economically, to provide some kind of set of guidelines to the people beneath them, the people who were not as fortunate, whether economically, genetically, socially, it doesn't really matter. And so we see this rising divorce rate. Case in point, in the 1950s, the marriage rate between working class, I mostly know the white demographics, but I know a couple of, basically working class whites and upper class, was pretty much identical. Now you couldn't. It's like aliens. Like those are aliens. You have the situation where marriage rates are still very strong in sort of educated, particularly educated white liberals. I mentioned this, but they're very low in working class white communities. And on top of that, the out of wedlock births have been skyrocketing over the last couple of decades. This seems to me almost certainly, I can't prove it definitively, a symptom of the upper class, the nobility, however you want to frame them, forgetting their noblesse oblige, forgetting the principles of obligation. But so many of those principles were bound to an economic system that no longer exists. The case in point, another case in point, is everyone can meme about this, but do you really think Jeff Bezos knows anything about Jose's life in his warehouse that he works in Texas? No, obviously not. And so the lack of community, the sheer size of society, lends itself to this utter decoupling from any sense of obligation, connectivity, or desire to even help people. If Chud Jones isn't doing well, who cares, right? It doesn't affect me. And you see this again and again. I was just kind of anecdotally the other day looking at the increase in rent prices in Austin. Now, you might know that a lot of these, we'll call them nobility, although they're different, the Joe Rogans and what have you, have been fleeing to Austin, because lower taxes. And what's been happening in Austin over the last couple of years, well, the rent is going up for the working class there. Do you think the podcasters like Joe Rogan or Chad Williamson really care about the fate of No, of course not. It's a tragedy of the you're familiar with the tragedy of the commons, I imagine, or yeah. It's an instance of that, I think, but it's a much broader sense that there's no greater sense of community anymore. People feel disconnected, and they just don't care what happens to the people rotting away. God, what is that infamous avenue or street in Philadelphia? The one that's Kensington, yeah. Kensington. Have you heard of Kensington Avenue by chance?
I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, potentially the worst, most drug-addled place in the United States. I mean, people just on the worst narcotics you can imagine, the worst poverty. Just it's a horrible, horrible situation for the people involved. Nobody cares though.
Yeah.
And I think this is really the problem. Yeah, to virtue signal that you do but do nothing. I'm not even, as I said, it's my own theory. I just think that most of these obligations used to be just economic, reinforced by the church, obviously, as well, when there was sincere Christian belief. My friend will not agree with me, but I think the loss of Christianity has been very damaging. Even though I don't have a religious bone in my body, I can still recognize the utility of things. Yeah. And so you just have this huge swaths of middle America, the working class, just rotting away. For sure you hear the opioid epidemic, and nobody really cares. Not really. I mean, they'll virtue signal and say they do, but they don't really care. And so the ecosystem just doesn't allow for this. Now, that's very different in a tightly knit community, which is why, this sort of thing doesn't happen in the Amish while they're all really connected. But even to a lesser degree, I could observe this. And I grew up in New York City, which is the biggest urban shithole in the United States. However, in the neighborhood I grew up in, you still knew the people, and the neighbors would collect the mail if you were away, like things like that. That just doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. Even
my father tells me that. My father, who's going to be 85 this year, tells me it doesn't exist anymore. And so a lot of this is down to that. Nobody wants to set an example anymore. Well, I mean, they're still going through they're doing the right things in their own lives, but they don't see any obligation to other people. In fact, I'm pretty certain that the elites have nothing but contempt for chuds and working class folk. And yeah, that's kind of it. And it's a very grim, it's a very grim setting. People have been talking about this for a long time. There's a guy called Charles Murray. He wrote a book called Coming Apart. It's about the disintegration of the white working class. But it's not just them. Even Hispanics, who are traditionally very, very religious, it's starting to encroach upon their communities too. So, lower divorce. It just, the cancer is everywhere, basically. And it's kind of a free-for-all. And I can't lie to you in all sincerity. I don't know if you'll be able to get what you want. I hope so, for your sake.
Yeah.
You're a good guy. But, I don't know if you can. I don't know. Maybe you can. But I mean, I think the trick is, unfortunately, is like, just be, wealthy and educated, bro. It's kind of, you're much more, because I look at the people who have none of these issues, and they kind of invariably fall into this category. Many of them are elites, but some of them are just academics. There's this guy I mentioned, Mackin Murphy, this Chad Light guy who, I don't know exactly what he is. He just does a lot of research on mating, and anyway, he's very autistic. But anyway, he's in a long-term relationship. He's probably going to marry his girlfriend and then propagate his DNA with her. Like, I just see, like, I don't know. Don't be the person you are in the situation you are, but that doesn't really, doesn't really help. And here's the other issue, right? Large urban centers are the places where there are more people, right? But large urban centers in the United States are really the epicenter of the disease, right? So it's like, in order to increase your chances of achieving what you want, you need to, have access to more people, ideally. But that carries with the risk of, what are these people going to be like? I don't think wherever you happen to live, moving to the largest city in your state is going to be a solution to this. Probably not. I don't know. I you know, I'm not telling you to do this, but I still think your best bet is, something like geomaxing and with JBW in Latin America. I guess.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you should or it's inevitable, and and you got time. You're 20. I mean, you're not even the prime. Your testosterone is just coming online. Your prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed. I mean, you haven't even hit your stride yet, potentially. So you should give it, make an effort in the context of where you are or wherever you're willing to live in the U.S. But I think by 30, and you'll still be young by then, if things haven't panned out by then, you might want to look into this other option. But the problem with that, and I don't know, my feet aren't on the ground, but I would worry about a kind of oversaturation of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, men who have failed in the West going usually eastward, but, southward in this case, I think you're going to see a lot more of that, right? And it's nothing new. This is nothing new. People don't talk about this, but a lot of the people that used to go on these voyages discovering the new world, right, 400, 500 years ago, they were basically these ne'er-do-wells, who couldn't really find a settled life at home frequently. And, what happened? They found the new world, and there's a reason why mestizos are a hefty mix of, Portuguese and Spanish ancestry, right? So,
Right.
Yeah, this has always been going on, but it's just the difference now is the accessibility and the oversaturation, and I just don't know how much of an effect that has had. I'd imagine it's getting worse. It was certainly look. I used to live in South Korea years ago. Now, 20 years ago almost, it's probably a lot worse because back then you were kind of a freak if you were a foreigner. Now it's kind of a dime a dozen. They're everywhere, and I've seen people compare the difference, and it's so I don't know. I wish I could just tell you, things are going to be okay, but that's not. I can only do that if I'm confident of the evidence, and I'm not. But I do know that you're a good guy. You have noble intentions, and you're endowed with a pretty good package. You're pretty good looking. You're not short. You're well built. You hit the gym. Is that a magic? No, it's not. But it's something. It's something.
Yeah.
I think that if I had to guess, the issue really would come down to reconciling your awareness of certain things. Like, you realize the black pilledness, for lack of a better term, right? Which I just think, is it black pill to be aware that genes dictate a huge portion of your life? I don't know, maybe, whatever. With some woman, because I mean, she's not going to believe that, or she's not going to think about it at least. Maybe you might tell her and she'll think, oh yeah, maybe you have a point, and then just move on. So I don't know. And what's been heard cannot be unheard, much like what's been seen cannot be unseen. I don't know. That might be a challenge, but yeah. It's really a shame that wanting something. See, in my own case, I didn't really want. I'm an evolutionary dead end. I'm a weirdo. I'm all these things, but there was never some. I mean, I wasn't totally against the idea, but there's never some crystal clear plan of, okay, I just want the kids and the fence and the dog. That just never occurred to me. I was a confused individual, at least to some degree. But in your case, it's like you just want something that seems simple that used to be kind of available everywhere, and I don't know. I do think it's part of is the terminally online thing, so you're going to probably have to try to get off more.
Yeah.
If you find that where you are is not producing results after a certain point in time, you probably should, check out move to a new location as well.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's, it's sad to say, but you're going to have to be even in the United States, somewhat mobile, So
go ahead and learn Spanish. Head down to Argentina.
I mean,
once I turn 30, I'll be like, all right, I'll give that a whirl.
Well,
That's my general plan.
there's so many opportunities to learn Spanish these days in the States. I mean, there's so like it's easy just because it's everywhere,
Yeah.
right? Whatever state you're in, I'm sure you probably see Hispanic people there too.
Yeah.
So yeah. So learn Spanish, and another option, a little less severe, is maybe you can find a Latina in the United States with primarily Iberian, i.e. Spanish heritage, as opposed to mestizo, more white, basically. I mean, that's another thing that might be, taken into consideration. Maybe. I don't know. But yeah, it's not easy. But I think I don't think your chances are the worst in the world. I mean, you're not a sub 5. You're not dumb. You're funny.
The thing is, the looks, I don't think they aspect into the actual maintaining of
Correct.
a relationship.
Absolutely, yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
That you're right.
I think that just has everything to do with the culture around us, and less to do with the actual individuals, even. Besides,
I mean, so I've looked into some of this data, and I've listened to Alexander Daysyk is the statistician. He's talked about this. Yeah. So the statisticians talked. I mean, it seems pretty clear that looks are really good for getting your foot in the door. Like it's like a job. Like you get your foot in the but if you're doing, if you're performing poorly on the job, your looks will give you some leeway, but it's not. You're going to be fired eventually if you're screwing up all the time, right? So it's kind of similar from what I've looked into, that looks are really important for the first 9 months or so, and after that it kind of recedes. There's kind of a cooling effect. It's like, well, yeah, my boyfriend's hot, but what else is there? That kind of thing. So yeah, but look, you need to get your foot in the door, right? And you have the tools to do so, presumably. So there's that, right?
The issue is, like, knowing what I know now, I have a certain list of things that I'm looking for that, it wouldn't be too uncommon not so long ago, but now it's just like, look, I can't be fat.
Well, what is that list?
Can't be a hoe. Can't be on drugs. Prefer to be white. Prefer to be in shape. Don't want to meet on the internet. And look, I just eliminated 98% of these bitches. You know what I mean?
But here's the thing. I don't know. Maybe you're right. Is it actually the case that like that many of them don't fall within that category? I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to sort of keep an open mind here.
Probably not that much, but most don't. Most don't. I can tell you that for sure.
So, as an example, what if you met a girl? She's pale as ice and burns in the sun, but she says that she occasionally smokes marijuana. Would that be a deal breaker?
Nah, that would be fine. Okay,
so you're somewhat flexible. But if she said that she's, let's say you meet your potential future wife at 23, and she's 21. You said, look, Gerbie, I have to tell you, I'm reformed now, but I've had sex with 50 men. Would that be a deal breaker? Okay, gotcha. Okay, yeah. Well, that's yeah. I mean, the thing about body count. Okay, I've looked into this too. I'm not an expert, but I've listened to the experts on this, and I've read things. So there actually there's some truth to basically past a certain point, higher body counts or higher social sexuality is associated with relationship failure. So that's absolutely true. But, I don't think it's reasonable just from a pragmatic perspective to expect that she was wearing a chastity belt her whole life. Like,
yeah, I'm not even looking. I'm just looking for like a similar dating history. Like, I've had a few experiences, and that's it. I don't want to be looking at someone, a young girl who's been hopping on Ween like a daily routine ever since she turned 14.
Guys, you see the rap skills there, hopping on Ween like a daily routine. I mean, it's, that's what I'm saying. If all else fails, you can be the new Eminem potentially. Yeah, I see it. I see it. Do you actually listen to rap actively, or?
when I'm working out, I'll occasionally turn to rap, usually more metal, but yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, they're. Yeah, I was a bit surprised. I mean, I guess it's more of a meme than you actively.
Yeah, I just think it's funny.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, but yeah, your rap routine is pretty good. Yeah, the problem is also it's not really the laundry list is not something you can just like hello, Jessica. I have do you mind? I have a form here. Can you fill out the form for I see. Okay, that box is okay. Well, I don't know. It just doesn't work that way. You kind of have to, because things look. Out. It's not just that things just work out organically, or they don't. I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to meet someone at some point in time, not too distant future, because of who you are. Legendary Gerby, and they're probably not going to line up 1-to-1 what you want, but you might like them anyway, and you're like, oh, I'm going to compromise. I mean, who knows? You should be suspicious but flexible.
Here's the thing. I don't think it's just what I want. I think it's like an informed decision about what will lead to the greatest amount of success for a relationship.
And I agree. I don't disagree with that. Not too high body count, drug addiction, I guess alcoholism, count that too.
Or also, I mean, like on a cocktail of pharmaceuticals, I mean, these broads are crazy. They could take something for you to function, but like a lot of these girls are just like, they're just like big pharma cow milking cows.
Yeah, I mean, for all the gynocentrism, which I think is operative to a certain degree, at the end of the day, women are just easy picks for profit. And you see this with like what's called almost like the girl crisis, right? With the addiction to social media and many of these other things. Frankly, it's just easy profit for them. So yeah, that's certainly. Hell, there's even a TikTok trend I read about girls bragging about pharmaceuticals they've been prescribed, like antidepressants, that sort of thing. Like, oh, do you know, Jessica? I'm taking Xanax. Oh, really? I'll one up you on that. I'm taking Xanax and Prozac. Oh my God, that kind of thing. So, yeah, women are herd creatures. So, yeah, there's it's difficult, but it's possible. Probably not probable, but possible. And you owe it to yourself to make the effort and to try. You may or may not succeed, but you will regret not having tried for sure. I think it's worth it, but I don't know how you. Yeah, I worry about people like you. I mean, it's not a perfect 1-to-1, but I brought up my friend who lives in a kind of major Midwest city, and he's older. He's 33, but he's still younger than I am. And over the years, I've seen how his faith in humanity has been fucking whittled out of him. And I've been in situations where I had to talk him out of some really dark places, and I'm still worried to this day. And the thing I've been observing with Zoomers, I mean, the starting point's even worse. It didn't start hitting him until his late 20s. But you're already 20. I'm just concerned for you and people like you that you're already starting in a dark place, and if you run up against obstacles, I don't know. It's very easy to get discouraged. Because here's the thing: this is the thing that bothers me the most. I wouldn't say one of the things that bothers me most about all this stuff. People act like everyone's an island. It's not true. No man is an island. There's no such thing as a self-made man. Every man you see in the world, every person, every woman that has some modicum of success, contentment in their life, has been helped by other human beings who gave a damn. And if you don't have those people in your life, it's going to be nigh impossible to achieve the things that you want to achieve. All these big shots online bragging about this and that, they've had, in most cases, healthy, intact families, supportive families, friends, professors, whatever it might be. What little I've achieved in my life, which hasn't been much, it's not on me. It's on the people that gave me opportunities and were understanding or bailed me out once or twice or whatever what might have been years ago. No man is an island, and I worry not having that type of network, which I don't know if you do or don't, to what degree. I'm worried that that's that could be the thing. And then if you try enough time, because that's the other thing I talk about, the Matthew effect, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
There's only so much effort you can put in and so much failure until someone's going to give up. And that's all well and good for Chad Williams to say, with his weird take on cynicism and this and that, but eventually everyone folds. If most of the stuff you're doing is met with failure, eventually you're going to fold unless, I don't know, you got some weird brain that you just keep on trying and failing. But
that's not even
most
smart.
people just,
that's not even a good trait.
It's not smart. No, it's not. It's not. Failure is meant to teach us things. Like if you try running a business, like a tennis shop and it fails, like you try again. You got to move on, right? And I think ultimately that's what happened in my life. You can put it down to genes or put it down to whatever it might be. I just was not going to be that super successful guy who's married who gets the girl. It just wasn't going to pan out that way. And that's kind of, I basically made my peace with that, more or less. It is what it is. And at some point in time, you gotta pull the ripcord, right? If you don't do that, then yeah, it's just stupid, as you said, absolutely. But I just worry about you falling into that pit. People. The other thing is, and this is something that runs counter to a lot of manospheres don't like to talk about this. I don't know, because it sounds like you need people to live for, whether it's a community, a family, a friend. You need people that actually matter. Unless you're some really weird hermit that has a weird psychological profile, and you're perfectly. And there are people like that, but you're not like that, and I'm not like that.
Yeah.
You need some kind of approximation of a community, something, because that's what, at the end of the day, that's what gives you a sense of actual fulfillment. Helping out people that you're close to, them scratching your back, that sort of thing. We don't talk. That doesn't really. I mean, it barely exists anymore in many circles, and yeah. So that's another thing. If on the way working towards your long-term goal of finding the white girl of your dreams, I think you need to also look for people that you connect with, that you can rely on. That's super, super important.
Yeah.
Because God, I feel like this turned into some old man lecture. I'm really sorry. I kind of wanted to have a conversation, but I'm like, well, you should. I'm basically giving advice without calling it advice, and well, this is just my opinion, my take. You can take it or leave it, but yeah, I think things like that are important. Yeah. So. Yeah.
You gotta find a way to find community or build community or do something now, which is like,
yeah.
That's never been, people blame it on young men. They're just like, you just have to go outside more, just like really get active. It's like, yeah, that's true. You should do that. But you have to acknowledge, never in history have you had to find community or build community. It was there from the time you were born. You were born, it was there. Everybody knew it. The social cohesion was there. Yeah. It's no longer there. It's like, its ultimate responsibility is on the individual to find a place where they belong. Where they can feel like
I mean, a lot of the trajectory of my life was just that, kind of essentially looking for community. I mean, I left the States around your age and never went back, and I never found that. But like I said, I failed in a lot of ways. But I don't think it wasn't for want of trying, and I think it's an important goal. But again, the people. There are people who they were just born into good communities and they got lucky, But as much as it's all true, ultimately life is about playing the hand you're dealt. Although you are the hand, but yeah, you got to somehow work the bad cards in your favor. But it's not easy. It's amazing though. I just think. There's this young guy who has this very it's a very simple thing. You just want to you get married and have kids, and
it's like a Herculean task in front of me, just doing just basic.
Yeah, it's like someone telling someone like 50 years ago, you want to found the third biggest business, and it's like that. That's no, you just want something that used to be reliably there and accessible. And the problem, and yeah, I don't know. It's definitely not GG for you. Not yet. You gotta give it a try. You gotta try a bunch of things, but it's kind of like the purpose of your channel, right? Is to sort of, I guess, vent some of that frustration, which is understandable, But ideally, at some point in time in the future, you won't be even online anymore. You'll have the white girl of your dreams, and you'll, I don't know, be out somewhere, hopefully. But that's going to take a while, I guess. And look, for all the harm it does, you can also learn things online. If it means anything, I got your back. I will support you any way I can to help you achieve what you need to achieve. It probably doesn't, not going to do much because, I don't have a lot of influence, but yeah, it's just, it's a shame to not have the same opportunities that previous, especially because those opportunities were just so consistent for so long, and now, the technology has changed everything. But but a lot of it's relatable nonetheless. So, anything we have not covered that you think is important that you'd like to get out there, the audience?
Well, not that I could think of, probably, but it is what it is.
Okay, well, if I'm happy to talk to you again. I think this has been a good chat, and I hope this is a good example of a base zoomer, right? And I think everyone who's sincere who hears your story is gonna want to wish you luck, and go check out his channel too, and check out his rap. It's pretty good. He knows how to lay down the fat beats. So yeah. But it's been an honor to talk to you.
Likewise.
And guys, go check it out, and I'll check you out later. All right. Keep it running for a little bit, because I need about 10 seconds of silence so I can work with something in Audacity to edit out any background noise. So
okay.
Okay, we're good. Yeah, if you're up for it, you can stop recording. Really appreciate you.
If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.